Oh hi. Great Britain, the island state in the northwest from continental Europe. The Uniform Kingdom Great Britain was formed in 1707 owing to political association of the kingdoms of Scotland and England. But still earlier, in 1603, the King of Scotland Jacob VI succeeded to the thrones of England and Ireland as the personal union. James I. In 1800 the Kingdom Great Britain and the Kingdom Ireland united, having formed the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, which after separation from him in 1922 of the Irish Free State began to be called as the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Great Britain, one of the largest states of Europe, the nuclear power since 1952. Recognized according to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty of 1968. The permanent member of the Union Security Council, the former mother country of the British Empire. The British monarch is also Chapter 15 of other independent states and the head Sadrazamstva. The former center of the world empire, Great Britain plays an important role in the international affairs also now. English became the second language in many countries of the world. He prevails on the internet and other international means of communication. Economy of Great Britain, the 9th in the world on the level of development. The military budget of the country, one of the highest in the world. The form of government, the parliamentary monarchy. Form of government, the quasi-unitary state where since the end of the 20th century 3 of 4 components of the countries, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, have rights of limited autonomy. To pass to the section, sharp the authorities in autonomies. The capital, the City of London, one of the largest cities of Europe and the financial and economic centers of the world. Official languages. Through the whole country, English. Are also officially recognized Welsh in Wales. Gaelic. The Scottish Celtic. And the Scottish German in Scotland, Cornish in Cornwall, England, Irish in Northern Ireland, Claudius Ptolemaeus in the work Almagest, 147-148 AD, calls the bigger island Big Britannia, and Ireland, Small Britannia. In the later work, Geography, 150 AD, he calls these islands of Albion, Ivernia and Mona, Isle of Man. It is supposed that these names were known to him in time of writing of Almagest. The name Albion, probably, went out of use after gaining islands by Romans after a while, and the island began to be called Great Britain. After the Anglo-Saxon period the name Britain began to be mentioned only as the historical term. Alfred Manmutsky in the semi-legendary composition, History of Kings of Britain, names Great Britain by Big Britannia. Big Britain, which it separates from Small Britannia, Smaller Britain, area in continental Europe where the Celtic immigrants from the British Isles in the 5th-6th century lodged. The name Great Britain for the first time was used officially in 1474 in the letter with the offer on marriage between Cecily of Edward IV's daughter from England and James III's son from Scotland, in whom it is told this noble island called by Great Britain. Officially this word sounded again in 1604 when the King Yakov VI proclaimed himself the King of Great Britain, France and Ireland. In Russian Great Britain, the most widespread designation of the United Kingdom. Great Britain, also called the island on which England, Scotland and Wales are located. In English, acronyms of GG and GB are used in documents for designation of the United Kingdom in some international organizations, such as Universal Postal Union, Teams, NATO, the International Standardization Organization, and also in the international codes. On the Internet, the domain .uk is used for designation of the websites belonging to the United Kingdom. The domain .gg, which was used earlier, is obsolete. New registration of the websites for aren't accepted. The name GG Team is used by the British Olympic Association for a name of Team of Great Britain and Northern Ireland at the Olympic Games. One more example of use of the name Britain instead of United Kingdom is use of the name Grand Prix of Great Britain in motorsport. The state is located on the British Isles. Island Great Britain, a northeast part of the island of Ireland, and also a large number of smaller islands and archipelagos, among which there are Gabrydskie, Orkney and Shetland Islands, Anglesey, Arran, White. In the Atlantic Ocean, it is washed Northern Irish, Celtic and Gabrydskie by the seas. The southeast coast is located in only 35 km from the northern coast of France, which are divided by English Channel. The area of Great Britain is 243,809 km. From them the land minus 240,579 km. Internal waters minus 3230 km. As of 1993, 10% of sushi were covered with the wood, 46% were used under pastures, and another 25% were used in agriculture. The coastline has 17820 km of length. The southern coast is connected to continental Europe through the Channel Tunnel, 50 km long, from which 38 km underwater. It is the longest underwater tunnel in the world. Northern Ireland has 499 km overland border with the Republic of Ireland, and it is the only overland border of Great Britain. The Greenwich Observatory in London is the place of passing of a zero meridian. In general, Great Britain is located between northern latitudes 49 and 61 and between 9 the western longitude and 2 east longitude. England occupies slightly more than a half of all territory of Great Britain, covering 130,395 km. Hershey Park consists of lowlands. Heights are concentrated on the north, Pennine Chain, and the northwest, Cumbrian Mountains. Among the last, the highest top of England, Scafell Peak, 978 m. Scotland occupies slightly less than a third of all territory of Great Britain, covering 78772 km. She includes about 800 islands, generally in the west and the north from the main territory. It is necessary to distinguish the Gabrydskie, Orkney and Shetland Islands from them. The topography of Scotland in many respects is defined by the boundary break of Highland, which crosses Scotland from the island Arran in the west to Stonehaven in the east. The line of a break divides two absolutely different regions. The Northern Highlands. Highland uplands. In the northwest and lowland in the southeast. Severe Highland contains almost all mountains of Scotland, including Ben Nevis, who with height in 1343 m is the highest point of the British Isles. Lowland. Lowland. Especially the lowlands between Gulfs Firth of Clyde and Firth of Forth, known also as the Central Belt, much more exactly. Here lives a she part of the population, including in the largest cities of Scotland, Glasgow and Edinburgh. Wales occupies all less 1/10 part of all territory of Great Britain, covering 20779 km. Wales, generally the Highland, though the southern Wales less gorist than the rest. The main population and industrial zones settle down in the southern Wales, including the coastal cities of Cardiff, Swansea and Newport. The highest mountains of Wales are located in Snowdonia, including Mount Snowdon with height in 1085 m. The coastline of Wales has extent in 1200 km. The largest island is Anglesey in the northwest. Northern Ireland occupies only 13843 km, and it is generally hilly. There is a Lake Lyneag, the biggest lake of the British Isles on the area. 388 km. The highest point of Northern Ireland, Slivdonard Mountains Mourne with height of 852 m. Great Britain has moderately oceanic climate with a large number of rains for all year. Temperatures change depending on a season, however seldom fall below 12 C or rise above 35 C. The main winds go from the southwest and often bring cold and wet weather from the Atlantic Ocean. However, east parts of the country are generally protected from these winds, and as the main part of rainfall drops out in the western regions east of the driest. The Atlantic currents warmed by Gulf Stream bring soft winters. Sometimes in the winter and in the early spring there are snowfalls, though snow usually lies not for long. Each of 4 autonomous parts of the United Kingdom has their own system of administrative and geographical division, which often proceeds still since before emergence of the state of Great Britain. Respectively, there is no standard level of an administrative unit connecting all Great Britain. Till the 19th century no changes of old divisions happened, however then continuous evolution of roles and functions began. However, these changes weren't universal, and further delegation of power of Scotland to Wales and Northern Ireland means, as further they will hardly be universal. The organisation of local government of England is very complex, with distribution of the functions depending on local orders. The legislative base concerning self-government of England is established by Parliament, and the government of Great Britain, as England has no own parliament. The highest level of division of England is made by 9 government regions or government regions of the European Union. One region, Greater London, has the Electoral Assembly and the Mayor since 2000 after support of this question on a referendum in 1998. It was supposed, as other regions will also receive the regional assemblies, however the refusal of that in North East England on a referendum in 2004 stopped this idea. Below the regional level goes our county council, and then regional councils, or unitary councils. London has the system from 32 London Borough. Members of council are elected on a majority system. Scotland is administratively divided into 32 districts with a big difference in sizes and the population among them. The cities of Glasgow, Edinburgh, Aberdeen and Dundee have the status of certain districts, as well as Highland, which includes the territory of a third of Scotland, but has the population only slightly more than Carr people. The rights of local management are carried out by elective deputies whom now 1222 and get paid part-time. Elections are held on the system of a uniform and transitive voice and elect 3 or 4 deputies who then elect the chairman who heads meetings and acts on behalf of all region. Wales administratively consists of 22 unitary educations, including Cardiff, Swansea and Newport, each of which has the status of separate education. Elections are held time in 4 years on a majority system. Northern Ireland since 1973 was divided into 26 areas. Their rights are limited only to the serving functions, such as cleaning of garbage, control of pets and care of parks. On March 13, 2008, the decision to create 11 new areas and to replace the existing system was made. The following local elections were cancelled till 2011 for the organisation of a new system. Britain extends the sovereignty to 17 territories which aren't a part of the United Kingdom. 14 British overseas territories lump 1 and 3 Crown Earth. 14 overseas territories. Anguilla, the capital of Wally. The Bermudas, capital of Hamilton. British Antarctic Territory, capital of Rotorua. British territory in the Indian Ocean, capital Diego Garcia. The British Virgin Islands, capital of Rogue Town. Gibraltar, capital Gibraltar. The Cayman Islands, capital of Georgetown. Ostrov Montserrat, capital of Plymouth. St. Helena, Ascension and Tristan da Cunha, capital of Jamestown. Pitcairn Island, capital of Adamstown. The Turks and Caicos Islands, capital of Cockburn Town. The Falkland Islands, capital of Stanley. South Georgia and the South Sandwich Islands, capital of Grytviken. And sovereign military bases in Cyprus, capital of Episkopi. The British claims in Antarctic have no universal recognition. Existence of military bases in Cyprus is challenged by the Republic of Cyprus, and the rights for the Falkland Islands, Argentina. Together overseas territories occupy 1,727,527 km. Without the British Antarctic Territory minus km. And their population makes part of these territories, heritage of the British Empire, and independently made a choice to keep the British sovereignty. Crown lands possession of the Crown, unlike overseas territories. Here Bali of the Channel Islands of Jersey and Guernsey in English Channel and the Isle of Man in the Irish Sea enter. The area of all 3 Crown lands is 766 km. And the population minus, being self-governed jurisdictions, they, also as well as overseas territories, aren't a part of the United Kingdom or the European Union, though the government of the United Kingdom is responsible for foreign policy and defensive questions, and the British Parliament has the right to issue laws on behalf of territories. The right of the publication of the acts concerning the island coexists with own legislative assemblies of territories with the consent of Privy Council of Corona. Heads of governments of Crown lands are the corresponding chief ministers. In Man since 1986, Guernsey with 2004, Jersey since 2005. Population 1935,405,900. 1949 card. 1959 card. 1976 card. 1998 card. 2004 59,834,900. 2005 60,441,457. 2007 60,776,238. 2009 61,634,783. 2011 63,182,178. The population census in Great Britain takes place at the same time in all her parts each 10 years. On the census of 2011 the general population of Great Britain made 63,181,775. On this indicator the country takes the 3rd place in the EU, the 5th in the British Commonwealth of Nations and the 21st in the world. To the middle of 2011 it is estimated at 62,698,362. In 2008 natural increase of the population began to influence more growth of the population than migration for the first time since 1998. From 2001 to 2008 the population grew with an average annual indicator in 0.5% that it is more than 0.3% during the period since 1991 on 2001 and 0.2% in the last decade. The data on the population published in 2008 in the middle of 2007 demonstrate that for the first time in the history of Great Britain there were more people of a retirement age than children up to 16 years. By some estimates, the number of people age of 100 years and more will grow to card by 2080. The population of England in the middle of 2008 was estimated at 51.44 million. That divided by the country from one of the highest population density in the world, having 383 inhabitants on square kilometer as of the middle 2003, with special concentration in London and in the southeast. Estimates of the middle of 2008 assume the population of Scotland in 5.17 million, Wales minus 2.99 million, and Northern Ireland minus 1.78 million, with much lower indicator of density of population of these territories. In percentage, growth of the population of Northern Ireland was the highest among other regions of Great Britain in all 4 years preceding 2008. London, Birmingham, Glasgow, Liverpool, Leeds treat the largest cities. In 2008 the total coefficient of birth rate of Great Britain made 1.96 children on 1 woman. No growth of an indicator of birth rate also contributes to growth of the population. He remains rather below peak of baby boom of 1964 in 2.95 children on 1 woman, and lower than the level of reproduction in 2.1, but above record-breaking low indicator of 2001 in 1.63 children on 1 woman. Scotland has the lowest indicator in 1.8 children on 1 woman, while Northern Ireland had this indicator at the level of 2.11 in 2008. Historically, residents of Great Britain are considered as mixture of various ethnic groups lodging in her territory till the 11th century. Celts, Romans, Anglo-Saxons, Vikings and Normans. Its genetic research has showed that more than 50% of the English genes contain the German Y chromosomes. However, recent genetic analyses demonstrate that about 75% of traceable ancestors of the modern British population arrived to the British Isles about 6,200 years ago, at the beginning of the British Neolithic, or the Stone Age, and also the British have in many respects the general ancestors of both. The United Kingdom has history small not white immigration. Liverpool has the oldest black population in the country, tracing the roots back at least to the 1730s, and also the oldest Chinese community, which is dated the first arrival of the Chinese seamen in the 19th century. In 1950 in Great Britain lived less than 2,000 not white, almost all from which were born abroad. Since 1945 constant immigration from Africa, the Caribbean islands and the southern Asia that was inheritance of the connection established by the British Empire. Migration from the new members of the EU in Central and Eastern Europe since 2004 led to rapid growth of communities from these countries. However, by 2008 this trend began to be developed as many migrants began to come back home. The racial structure varies in different parts of the country. 30.4% of the London population of and 37.4% Leicester in 2005 made not white, while less than 5% of the population of North East England, Wales and South West England were ethnic minorities following the results of a census of 2001. English-speaking world. The countries with most of the population for which English is native are painted in dark blue. The countries where it official, but not language of the majority, are painted in light blue. English is also one of official languages of the European Union and Union. Official language of Great Britain English. De facto. The West German language, which developed from Old English, which had a large number of loans from Drevna Skandinavsky, Norman, French and Latin languages. English extended worldwide in many respects thanks to the British Empire and became international language of business and the most popular second learned language. It was supposed that after an exit from the EU, English will lose the status of one of 24 official languages of the EU. The Scottish language. German, which developed from early Northern Middle English, is noticeable at the European level, as well as his dialect in the northern counties of Ireland, the Ulster Scottish language. 4 more Celtic languages are used in Great Britain: Welsh, Irish, Scottish, Gaelic, and Cornish. During the census of 2001, about 21% of the population of Wales told that they can talk on Welsh, that it is more than 18% in a census of 1991. About more people living in England also speak on Welsh. The census of 2001 in Northern Ireland showed that 167,487, 10.4%, people had some knowledge Irish, almost all from the Catholic or nationalist population. More than 920,000 in Scotland. Slightly less than 2%. Had some knowledge Scottish Celtic, including 72% of inhabitants of External Hebrides. The number of school students to whom teach the Welsh, Scottish Celtic or Irish languages also grows. Welsh and Scottish Celtic languages are also used by small groups of people in the world outside Great Britain. For example, on Scottish Celtic, the number of residents of Nova Scotia and Canada, especially on the island of Cape Breton Island, talks some, and a quantity of residents of the Argentina province Chubut, Patagonia, talks on Welsh. In the United Kingdom in general, school students are obliged to learn the second language till a certain moment. Up to 14 years in England, and to 16 in Scotland. The French and German languages, two languages most learned the second in these two regions. In Wales, teach school students up to 16 years on Welsh, or learn Welsh as to the second language. The social structure of Great Britain was historically formed under the influence of a concept of a social class which has the impact on the British society and now. The British society before the Industrial Revolution, as well as society of the European neighbours of Great Britain and the most part of societies of world history, was feudal and was divided into the groups on the hierarchical principle based on hereditary transfer of an occupation, the social status and political influence. After the beginning of industrialization, this system began to be reconsidered constantly, and now formation of the personality depends not only on origin, but also on many other factors, including educations. Though definitions of a social class in Great Britain vary and are often rather subjective, many of them depend on such factors as welfare, and occupation and education. Before entry into force of the Act of Lifelong Peerage of 1958, the Parliament of Great Britain was organised by the class principle. The House of Lords consisted only of hereditary representatives of the top class, and the House of Commons of all others. The British monarch, as a rule, is at top of all class society. The British society was considerably transformed from the moment of the end of World War II, namely in respect of expansion of opportunities for receiving the higher education and possession of property, shift towards the national economy focused on services, migration of masses, expansion of a role of women in society and shift of culture towards individualism. At the same time, statements that in Great Britain classless society was created are rather often perceived with skepticism. Researchers show that the social status in Great Britain is affected by a social class. The largest research poll on social stratification in Great Britain is so-called Great Britain Class Poll. Main religions. The Christianity, the most widespread religion. Card. -71.6% Islam. Card. -2. 7% Hinduism. Card. -1% Sikhism. Card. -0.6% Judaism. Card. -0.5% the Buddhism. Card. -0.3% other religions. Card. -0.3% atheists. Card. -15.5% refrained from the answer. Card. -7.3%. In the territory of England there is a church with the state status, Church of England, which secular head, the British monarch. Church of England, one of the local churches entering into the Anglican community, having the spiritual leader of the Archbishop Canterbury. The largest Christian faiths in Great Britain are Anglicans. More than 25 million. Catholics. 5.6 million. Presbyterians. More than 1 million. The most fast-growing faith of the country is represented by Pentecostals. AP. 1 million. According to researchers, the United Kingdom, the country with mainly secular population. Only 38% of people declare the faith in God. A God. Though, according to Church of England for 2005, 72% of the population of England specified the religious affiliation as Christian. It agrees to the research published in April 2008 conducted by Christian charity foundation Joseph Rowntree Foundation. The prevailing opinion is the view of religion as on the social evil. The same results were received as a result of other similar researches. Stonehenge in Wiltshire was constructed in about 2500 BB. Settling by modern people of the territories which entered later Great Britain began about back and happened waves. It is considered that by the end of the prehistoric period the population generally belonged to the culture of Island Celts. English. The including Britons of the island Britain and Gel of the island of Ireland. The Roman conquest of Britain, which began in the 43rd year, had led to 400-year board of Rome over the southern part of Britain, which invasion of the German Anglo-Saxon settlers followed that led to assimilation with Celts. At the same time, some tribes of the Celtic Britons located in the territory of present Wales. The territories occupied by Anglo-Saxons and Celts united to the Kingdom England in the 10th century were as Gela of northwest Britain, presumably migrating from northwest Ireland in the 5th century. United with Picts and formed in the 9th century the Scottish Kingdom. In 1066 Normans intruded in England, and after her gain took the most part of Wales and Ireland and received the invitation to the settlement in Scotland. They brought to all these countries feudalism of the North French sample and the Norman French culture. The Norman elite strongly affected all local cultures, but as a result assimilated with them. The subsequent kings of England finished conquest of Wales and unsuccessfully tried to annex Scotland. After that, Scotland maintained the independence, despite almost constant conflicts with England. Inheritance of considerable territories of France and a claim for the French throne incessantly involved the English monarchs in the conflicts with France, the most considerable of which Centenary War was. In 1536 the Parliament of England unilaterally formally annexed Wales and Ireland since 1542. Crown of Ireland Act 1542 appeared in the personal union with the English Crown. In territories which became Northern Ireland, subsequently lands of the independent Catholic Gaelic nobility were confiscated and distributed to Protestant settlers from England and Scotland. In the 16th century, in the countries making Great Britain, there took place processes of the Reformation that led to establishment of Protestant state religions in each of the countries, in particular in England. Reformation in England and Scotland. Reformation in Scotland. In 1603 the kingdoms of England, Scotland and Ireland were integrated as the personal union when the King of Scotland Jacob VI inherited crowns of England and Ireland and transferred the yard from Edinburgh to London. Nevertheless, each country kept separate political identity and own political institutes. In the middle of the 17th century, all three kingdoms were involved in a series of the military conflicts, including civil war, which led to temporary overthrow of the monarchy in 1649 and to an undurable establishment of the unitary state, the English Republic. Though the monarchy in 1660 was restored, owing to Nice Revolution of 1688, it became clear that, unlike other Europe, absolute monarchy has no future. The political system of the state developed on the basis of constitutional monarchy and a parliamentary system. During this period, especially in England, led development of sea power, an interest in geographical discoveries, to accession and settling of overseas colonies, generally in North America. On May 1, 1707 there was a kingdom Great Britain created by the political union of the kingdoms of England and Scotland according to the Contract on the Union of 1706, which was agreed in previous year and is ratified English and Scottish by parliaments. In the 18th century the country played an important role in development of the Western ideas of parliamentarism and also made a contribution to literature, art and science. The Industrial Revolution conducted by Britain changed the country and provided growth of the British Empire. At this time Britain, as well as other great powers, was involved in colonial development, including a slave trade, though after adoption of the Act of the Slave Trade in 1807 the United Kingdom occupied the leading role in fight against her. Britain first of all was concentrated on colonies in North America. After their loss owing to the War of Independence of the USA, imperial ambitions addressed on other parts of the planet, in particular on India. In 1800 Parliaments of Great Britain and Ireland adopted the Act of the Union, having united two kingdoms and having created the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, which appeared on January 1, 1801. After defeat of France in Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars, 1792-1815. Great Britain was the main sea and economic power, with London, the largest city in the world approximately from 1830 to 1930, and remained a superstate to the middle of the 20th century. Without having the competition at the sea, Britain assumed a role of the world arbitrator, a situation, late known as Pax Britannica. It was also the period of rapid economic, colonial and industrial growth. England was metaphorically called a world workshop. British Empire annexed India, considerable possession in Africa and other territories worldwide. Besides formal control which she established over the colonies, domination of Britain in world trade meant also the actual economic control over many countries, such as China, Argentina and Siam. In the internal market there was a transition to free trade policy and laissez-faire and considerable expansion of trade. In the country the rapid growth of the population within a century accompanied with a fast urbanization that led to considerable social and economic shocks was observed. To the end of the century other states began to compete with Britain in industrial domination. Infantry of Royal Irish Shooters during fight on Somme. Morden Card lost life on fields of battles of World War I. Britain, on an equal basis with Russia, France and the USA. Since 1917. Was one of the main powers waging war minus the German Empire and its allies in World War I. 1914-1918. Military forces of Britain exceeded 5 million people, which were brought together from all empire and some regions of Europe and played one of the main roles on the Western Front. The nation had about 2.5 million wounded and finished war with a huge sovereign debt. After war, Great Britain received the mandate of the League of Nations on the former German and Ottoman colonies, thanks to what the British Empire expanded to the biggest sizes, covering the 1/5 part of the earth where a quarter of the world population lived. However, growth of the Irish nationalism and disputes in Ireland concerning Gomeril's conditions led to the actual division of the island in 1921, with the independent Irish Free State in Northern Ireland, the rest of Great Britain. The Great Depression, 1929–1932, came when the United Kingdom was still far from restoration from war consequences, and entailed disorders, including political and social disorders. The British soldiers land in Normandy. Great Britain lost in World War II. Britain, together with France and the colonies, declared war of Germany on September 3, 1939, that turned the begun earlier Polish-German conflict into global war. I was one of three main allies in World War II, minus the countries of Axis. After defeats of the European allies, Great Britain continued fight against Germany, in particular in the Battle of Britain and the Battle of Atlantic. During war and after the victory over Germany, the United Kingdom was one of three powers participating in a series of conferences on a post-war peace arrangement. Tehran Conference, 1943. Yalta Conference, February 1945. Potsdam Conference, summer of 1945. War left the country in financial hardship and with huge debt to the USA, which since 1948 began the aid program to Europe, known as Marshall Plan. Britain paid the last sum of a military debt to America only by the end of 2006. Territories which were a part of the British Empire. Modern British overseas territories are emphasized by red. The Labour government in post-war years initiated the radical program of transformations which had an impact on the British society in the next decades. Within the country, many industries and the serving companies were nationalised, the system of the state social security and socially financed healthcare system was created. In response to growth of local nationalism, decline of the British economy and the requirement of the United States government, I began to give independence to colonies. Decolonization with Declaration of Independence of India and Pakistan in 1947. Within several next decades, the majority of territories of the empire gained independence and became sovereign states of the British Commonwealth of Nations. After World War II, Britain lost control over most of the former colonies, but received the place of one of 5 permanent members of the Union Security Council, and in 7 years became the 3rd country of nuclear club. The first test of an atomic bomb in 1952. Having independently developed atomic weapons after refusal in 1945 of the United States government, a Lump 2 to report to Britain results of joint researches in nuclear area according to former arrangements. Lump 3. After Suez Crisis of 1956, which was the painful geopolitical damage caused first of all by the direct ultimatum from Shah, the country finally for Britain ceased to play an independent role in the international relationship as the great power, and since then strictly follows the foreign policy line. The international prevalence of English provided further international influence of the British literature and culture, and from the 1960s and pop culture began to have an impact abroad. In view of the shortage of labour, the British government began to stimulate immigration from the Commonwealth countries in the 1950s, thus transforming Britain to multi-ethnic society. In 1973, the United Kingdom joined the European Economic Community. Since the end of the 1960s to the Belfast Agreement in 1998 in Northern Ireland, the conflict between radical groups of the Protestant majority and Catholic minority, which was also involving police and the British Armed Forces, took place. After the period of the global economic delay and lag in an economic competition in the 1970s, the conservative government in the 1980s began radical policy of deregulation, in particular the financial sector and labor market, carried out privatization of the state companies and cancellation of the subsidies which remained. With support since 1984 of financial oil revenues in the North Sea, Great Britain tested the period of big economic growth. By the end of the 20th century there were big changes in management of the country to establishment of Devolved national administration in Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales after pre-lawful referenda and introduction of the laws corresponding to the European Convention on Protection of Human Rights. Big contradictions within the country caused the foreign military operations of Britain in the first decade of the 21st century, especially invasion into Iraq and the Afghan campaign. In 2013 in the country same-sex marriages were legalized. The entry of Britain in 1973 in the European Economic Community. Since 1993 the European Union put end under the history of the country as colonial mother country, and transfer in 1997 of Hong Kong under sovereignty of the People's Republic of China, deprived of her the last considerable colonial possession. On June 23, 2016 in the country there took place vote about membership in the European Union. 51.9% of comers for a referendum. 37% of all voters voted for an exit, and the population of Scotland, Northern Ireland and London voted against an exit from EC. On June 24, 2016 the Prime Minister David Cameron, supporting preservation of membership in the EU, announced early resignation. On July 13, 2016 Theresa May, who led Conservative Party 2 days before, was appointed the Prime Minister. March 29, 2017 the European Council President Donald Tusk received the letter from Theresa May notifying on an exit of the United Kingdom from the EU. It was expected that the state will leave the European Union on March 29, 2019 at 23 o'clock across Greenwich. However, as a result of rigid disagreements between positions of all parties in Parliament and also in the government of Great Britain, date of an exit, the amendment to the law was postponed for April 12 or for May 22, 2019. On March 29 the House of Commons for the third time rejected the draft agreement on an exit from the European Union submitted for discussion by Theresa May's government, thus having cast the country into a long political crisis. Great Britain left the European Union on January 31, 2020 at 23 o'clock on London. Great Britain, quasi-unitary state with the parliamentary monarchy. Queen Elizabeth II, the ruling monarch of the United Kingdom and also the ruling monarch of 15 other independent states of the Commonwealth. There was a wrong opinion that the British monarch has rather symbolical than political role, possessing, according to Walter Bagehot, in relation to the government, the right to get advice, the right to induce and the right to warn. However, the monarch, as the head of state presented by Institute of the Crown, heads all three branches of the power, has the right of dissolution of Parliament, appoints ministers, and also as the supreme commander has the right to declare war to other countries. Great Britain has no constitution as uniform document. The Constitution of Great Britain consists, generally, of a meeting of various written sources, including statutes, judicial precedents and international treaties, on an equal basis with the constitutional customs. The Parliament is the supreme legislature of Great Britain, while the delegated Parliament of Scotland and also assemblies of Northern Ireland and Wales adopt laws only within the delegated powers and in borders of the jurisdictions. The Parliament of Great Britain can't abolish legislature of autonomies which constant constitutional status is guaranteed by laws of the Parliament and also international treaties. See, for example, Act of Scotland of 1998 and 2016. Belfast Agreement of 1998. As there is no technical difference between usual statutes and constitutional right, the Parliament of Great Britain can undertake the constitutional reform, just having adopted the next law, and, thus, has an opportunity to change or cancel practically any written or unwritten element of the Constitution. However, according to the constitutional doctrine of parliamentary sovereignty, any parliament won't be able to adopt the law which the following convocation couldn't change. The United Kingdom has the parliamentary government founded on the Westminster system, which is also used in a number of the former colonies of the British Empire. The Parliament of Great Britain sitting at the Westminster Palace has two chambers: the Electoral House of Commons and the appointed House of Lords. Any accepted document demands the royal sanction to become the law. The Member of Parliament which will be able to get support of the majority in the House of Commons is appointed to a post of the Prime Minister, head of the government of Great Britain, according to custom, the monarch, and thus to create the government. Since the beginning of the 20th century he, always the member of the House of Commons, the leader of political party of the majority in chamber. The ministers making the governments of Her Majesty are also appointed the monarch. However, the Prime Minister himself brings together the cabinet, and by tradition the monarch respects the choice of the Prime Minister. The Cabinet of Great Britain usually gets out of members of the party of the Prime Minister in both chambers of Parliament, but generally of the House of Commons, before which he is responsible. Executive power is carried out by the Prime Minister and an office which all take the oath to Privy Council of Great Britain. For elections to the House of Commons, Great Britain is divided into 650 constituencies where each certain member of Parliament gets out the usual majority. The general elections appear the monarch when advises him to make the Prime Minister. Parliamentary Acts of 1911 and 1949 demand that new elections were announced no later than 5 years later from previous. Four main parties of Great Britain are Conservative Party, the Labour Party, the Scottish National Party, and the Liberal Democrats. During the last general election, 2017, these four parties received 627 places from 650 possible in the House of Commons. The majority of other places were received by smaller parties which participated in elections only of this or that part of the United Kingdom. The Party of Wales, only Wales, and the Democratic Unionist Party, the Social Democratic and Labour Party, the Ulster Unionist Party, and Sinn Féin. All only in Northern Ireland, though Sinn Féin also participates in elections in the Republic of Ireland. According to policy of the party, any member of Parliament from Sinn Féin party was never present at the House of Commons for representation of interests of the constituency, as members of Parliament are obliged to take the oath to the monarch that is contrary to policy of the party. Present 7 members from Sinn Féin since 2002 used the offices and other opportunities in Westminster. For elections to the European Parliament, Britain has 72 deputies elected in 12 districts with several winners in every one. Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland from 1998 years have the own executive authorities headed by the First Minister and devoluzione unicameral legislature. England, the largest part of Great Britain, has neither executive nor legislature and is operated directly by the British government and Parliament on all questions. This situation created so-called the Western Lothian problem, connected with the fact that deputies from Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland can vote and sometimes have a crucial role on the issues concerning England, which are resolved by the delegated legislators independently in the regions. However, in 2015 the Prime Minister David Cameron achieved adoption of the new parliamentary procedure. Evil English votes for English laws and neutralizing this legislative imbalance in favour of England. The interbudgetary relationship of various territorial and administrative parts of Great Britain is under construction on the basis of so-called Vernet's formula used by Treasury for distribution of volumes of the public expenditures since the beginning of the 1970th years. The Scottish Government and Parliament have large powers on all questions, not being within the exclusive competence of the British Parliament, including education, healthcare, laws of Scotland, transport, local taxation, the judicial system, law enforcement agencies and local government. After the victory on elections of 2007, the Scottish National Party, supporting independence for the first time, created the Scottish Government. To this day holds the power in all subsequent administrations. The Puslidovalny policy of autonomism and also inability of London to support a course on federalism in the country created prerequisites for holding the first, unsuccessful referendum on independence in 2014 and also to demand a repeated referendum from the government of Great Britain by results of an exit of the United Kingdom from EC. Unionist parties answered with creation of several commissions on the Scottish devolution, which in 2009 and 2015, respectively, prepared recommendations about delegation of the additional power, including control of a half of the taxes collected in Scotland, powers on the state loans, etc. The Government of Wales and the National Assembly of Wales have less large powers than the Scottish authorities. Initially, after adoption of the Act of Management of Wales in 2006, the Assembly could adopt local laws only after receiving approval of Westminster under each concrete law. However, since May 2011 the Assembly can issue laws through adoption of Acts of Assembly already without the need for additional permissions. The present government was created after elections of 2018 by the Labour administration headed by Mark Drake Fordham and also conducts a course for independence of the country. The Cabinet of Northern Ireland and Assembly have special powers, owing to the conclusion of the Belfast Agreement of 1998. According to the contract, the territory has constitutional right of secession by results of a public referendum. The cabinet is formed on the basis of the consultationally principle of management, at which leading parties are represented equally, and the First Minister and his deputy have powers equal with each other. The elected members of Assembly take the oath not to the British monarch, but a law letter, and is only one of ruling represented in the British Parliament, while representatives of Sinn Féin party use policy of an abstentionism, refusing to swear to the monarch already having been elected to Parliament. The United Kingdom has no uniform legal system, as according to paragraph 19 of the Agreement on Association of 1706, Scotland kept an own legal system. Today Great Britain has 3 different legal systems: English law, right of Northern Ireland and right of Scotland. Recent constitutional changes led to creation of the Supreme Court in October 2009 for replacement of Appeal Committee Houses of Lords. The Judicial Committee of Privy Council, including all members of the Supreme Court, is the supreme appeal body for several independent Commonwealth countries of the nations, the British Overseas Territories and Crown Lands. In Great Britain there is no uniform written constitution. She is replaced by a set of acts of various character and also norm of common law and some constitutional customs. The most important acts forming the British Constitution are the Great Charter of Liberties, 1215. Habeas Corpus Act, the Bill of the Rights, 1689. And the Act of a Succession to the Throne, 1701. The most part of the precepts of law regulating activity of the English companies. The corporate legislation is reflected in the law on the companies of 2006. Companies Act. One of the biggest laws for all history of the English legislation. It consists of 1,300 articles and 16 applications occupying about 700 pages. The English law applied in England and Wales, and the North Irish Rite are based on common law. The feature of common law consists that it includes judicial precedents, the decisions on particular cases made by a court which become the rule obligatory for application in a similar case by all vessels of the same or lowest instance. Thus, the right is created by vessels in the course of judicial proceedings of various affairs by application of laws, statutes, and their interpretation. Superior courts aren't obliged to adhere to the decisions made by inferior courts, but can consider them. Courts of England and Wales are headed by the main Court of England and Wales, consisting of Court of Appeal, High Court of Justice, for civil cases, and vessels of the Crown, for criminal cases. The Supreme Court is final instance both for civil and for criminal cases in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, and any decision made by it is an example for any other court in these jurisdictions and also has a great influence on other jurisdictions. Legal capacity in English law. Unlike Scots law, the persons which reached 18-year age have the right of Scotland is a hybrid of common law and the continental right. The main vessels are Sessional Court for civil cases and the Supreme Criminal Court for criminal cases. His decisions are final. The Supreme Court of the United Kingdom serves as the last court of appeal for civil cases of Scots law, but not for criminal. The Scots case law is unique, the fact that in it there are 3 possible versions of the verdict of the jury. I am guilty, I am not guilty, and it isn't proved. To last, a justificatory without a possibility of repeated court, and a verdict isn't proved. Also sometimes for a phone call, isn't guilty, but more so don't do. Legal capacity in Scots law, the persons which reach 16-year age have From 1981 to 1995 the number of crimes in England and Wales strongly increased, however then, by 2008, dropped from the peak value by 48%. The number of prisoners for the same period practically doubled, having exceeded. That means that England and Wales have the highest number of prisoners in relative expression in Western Europe, with an indicator in 147 prisoners on. In Scotland, the number of crimes in 2010 was reduced to the lowest quantity for the last 32 years, having dropped by 10%. At the same time, the number of prisoners exceeded 8,000, having beaten all record levels. Great Britain, the permanent member of the Union Security Council, (G), NATO, OD, the UTO, Council of Europe, OSCE, the European Union. Following the results of the referendum on membership of Great Britain in the European Union held on June 23, 2016 the government began on March 29, 2017 the procedure of an exit of the country from EC. Our monarch heads the British Commonwealth of Nations. Great Britain has what since World War II is informally called a special relationship with Shaw and close partnership with France, the Warm Agreement, and also has the general program of nuclear weapons with these two countries. Other close allies include other members of the EU, NATO and the Commonwealth countries and also Japan. World presence and influence of Britain amplify also thanks to trade relations, foreign investments, official aid for development and to military forces. The USA closely cooperates with Britain in the military sphere. According to the Contract on Mutual Defense of 1958. And in the sphere of global espionage, according to the Agreement of Ucas-Sigint of 1946. According to a number of the higher-ranking British officials, in particular the head of the Joint Intelligence Committee Roderick Braithwaite, 1992-1993. And the Minister of Foreign Affairs Robin Cook, 1997-2001. Britain de facto lost the sovereignty and is in a role, completely subordinated and dependent on the USA, in such areas as national defense, safety, espionage and also in questions of an extradition of the citizens. The relevance of the term special relationship with the USA was called into question at the beginning of the 21st century, among other things, in view of recognition by the Special Commission in July 2016 and reasonable invasions of the USA and Britain into Iraq in 2003. The commitment to the special nature of a relationship between the USA and Great Britain at the end of January 2017 was confirmed by the United States President Donald Trump and the Prime Minister Theresa May, who became the first foreign leader who visited Washington after Trump's inauguration. Trump characterized the European Union as the tool for achievement of the goals of Germany and called the decision of Great Britain on an exit from the EU a magnificent thing. Great Britain established diplomatic relations with the USSR in 1924. In 1968 the USSR and Britain ratified the Consular Convention. In the second half of the old years of the relation gained intense character owing to disagreements on cases of an extradition and events similar to Litvinenko's business, which remains a considerable irritant in our bilateral relationship. October 2015 The ambassador of Russia in Great Britain Alexander Yakovenko said that political dialogue between London and Moscow practically came to naught. A year later he said the diplomatic establishment has no necessary number of employees as the authorities of Great Britain don't issue several months the visa to diplomats who had to replace the colleagues who were coming back to Russia. The reciprocal sanctions imposed in 2014 in connection with annexation of the Crimea to Russia and the conflict in the east of Ukraine remain in force. Addressing the press after the meeting with leaders of the EU in Brussels on October 20, the new British Prime Minister Theresa May said that the country will continue to cooperate actively with the EU and supported strengthening of pressure upon Russia in case of continuation of offensive at Aleppo of the Syrian army with assistance of the Russian aircraft. On May 1, 2012 the British Foreign Office reported introduction of the ban on entry into the country to violators of human rights. In the report of the EMA it is said, the ban on entry into Great Britain in the general order will extend to persons concerning whom there are independent, reliable and credible data on their participation in human rights violations. BBC. Britain closes entrance to violators of human rights. The report on a condition of democracy and human rights in 2011 contains the separate article devoted to Russia. In her it is told in particular about Sergei Magnitsky's business. The report underlines that nobody from responsible for arrest and Magnitsky's death in the pre-trial detention center and also the officials accused by him of corruption was punished.
During the referendum of 2016 for an exit of Great Britain from the European Union, 51.9% which voted respectively supported continuation of membership in the EU, 48.1% of voters acted.
In various components of Great Britain, results of vote differed. So, residents of Scotland and Northern Ireland spoke mainly against an exit and representatives of England, apart from the capital, and Wales for. The first reaction of world community was a little surprised. Results of a referendum even brought some into shock, as many political scientists predicted other result of vote. On January 31, 2020 at 23 o'clock. On the London time.
The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, after 47 years of membership, formally left structure of the European Union, and on December 31, 2020, European Economic Area.
Great Britain has one of the most technologically advanced and well-trained armies in the world, and for 2008 had about 20 military bases worldwide.
On different sources, Britain has the world's third or fourth military expenses, though takes only the 27th place on the number of troops. The total military costs make about 2.5% of GDP of the country. The British Army, the Royal Air Force and Royal Navy together make Armed Forces of Great Britain, which officially are called Armed Forces of Her Majesty.
All three types of armies are operated by the Ministry of Defense and are controlled by the Special Council of Oberona, headed by the State Secretary Oberoni.
The Commander-in-Chief of the British Armed Forces is the British monarch, Queen Elizabeth II. Great Britain has the biggest air forces and the fleet in the EU and the second largest in NATO. The Ministry of Defense signed contracts in the total cost
$3.2 billion on construction of 2 new super aircraft carriers like Queen Elizabeth on July 3, 2008.
For the beginning of 2009, the British Army totaled servicemen, the Air Force minus, and the Fleet minus. Special purpose troops of Great Britain, such as Special Air Service and Special Boat Service, have special troops for fast mobile, carrying out military counter-terrorist operations on the earth, water and in air, usually in cases where the privacy is necessary. Also there are reserve forces called in case of need, numbering 404,090. The main objective of the British Armed Forces is protection of the United Kingdom and its overseas territories, advance of interests of safety of Great Britain and support of the international peacekeeping efforts. They are active and regular participants of NATO. Foreign garrisons and bases are on Ascension Island, in Belize, Brunei, Canada, Cyprus, Diego Garcia, Germany, on Falklands, in Gibraltar, Kenya and Qatar.
Despite military opportunities of Great Britain, recently the military policy of the country is based that the most resource-intensive operations are performed as a part of the coalition.
Apart from intervention in Sierra Leone in 2000, the British military operations in Bosnia, Kosovo, Afghanistan, Iraq, and absolutely recent in Libya, follow this statement. The last war in which Great Britain was involved was the Falkland War in 1982, which terminated in a victory. London, the largest financial center in the world on an equal basis with New York. Great Britain, the advanced post-industrial state. Great Britain has partially adjustable market economy. Counting by market exchange rates, Great Britain is the sixth largest economy in the world and Europe's second after Germany.
The Treasury headed by the Chancellor is responsible for development and execution of public financial and economic policy by the British government.
The Bank of England, the central bank of Great Britain, is also responsible for release of national currency pounds sterling. Banks of Scotland and Northern Ireland also have the right for issue of own banknotes, however are obliged to have enough banknotes of the Bank of England for a covering of all own release. The pound sterling is the third largest reserve currency in the world, after US dollar and euro.
Since 1997, the Committee on the Monetary Policy of the Bank of England is responsible for establishment of an interest rate at the level necessary for achievement of the target rate of inflation established by the Chancellor annually.
The British services sector, the main sector of national economy, making about 75% of VVV. London, one of three control centers of world economy, along with New York and Tokyo. The largest financial center on an equal basis with New York and the biggest city DDD in Europe. Edinburgh is also a large European financial center. The tourism contribution to national economy is considerable. In 2014, the industry was estimated in 121.1 billion that made 7.1% of the British DDD. The country took the 8th place in the world among the directions of tourism on number of visitors, and London visits the most large number of guests among all cities of the world.
Industrial revolution began in Great Britain with an initial emphasis on the textile industry, which such heavy industry as shipbuilding, coal mining and stålplavning followed.
The empire created the foreign markets for the British products that allowed Britain to dominate in international trade in the 19th century.
In process of industrialization of other countries, together with 2 world wars, Great Britain began to lose competitive advantages and the heavy industry began to die away.
Now production still plays an important role in economy, however borrowed only 1/6 DDD in 2003. Automotive industry, one of the main in the industrial sector of Great Britain. In her works modern card with a total turnover in 52 billion, also create 26.6 billion export. The aviation industry of Britain is the second or third in the world, depending on calculation methods, and has a total turnover in 20 billion. Pharmaceutical industry of Great Britain also plays an important role and has the world's third expenses on researches, after the USA and Japan. Great Britain is known for the low indicators to labor productivity in comparison with other developed countries. For 1 working hour, the British worker makes about 20% less products than workers of other countries of Group of 7. Poverty level usually is defined as 60% of the average income of a household. In 2007-2008, 13.5 million residents of Great Britain, 22% of the population,
lived below the poverty line.
It is the highest relative rate in the EU except 4 countries.
The independent review prepared by Joseph Rowntree Foundation Fund in 2017 noted that below the poverty line there are 14 million residents of the country.
In the last quarter 2008 in the British economy recession, for the first time since 1991 began.
Unemployment rate grew from 5.2% in May 2008 to 7.6% in May 2009, and by January 2011 unemployment among young people from 18 to 24 years grew from 11.9% to 20.3%, the highest rate for the history of calculations of this indicator since 1992.
The total public debt of Great Britain grew from 44.5% of GDP in December 2007 to 76.1% of GDP in December 2010. In 2016, the national debt was estimated in 1.6 trillion, having made for 2015 record in 100 years in peacetime of 89.20% of GDP. GDP growth in 2015 was 2.2% against 2.9% in 2014. Well-developed banking sector and comparative liberal regulation do the country, first of all the London City, the world centre of laundering of the criminal income gained worldwide, according to a number of researches and publications of the middle of the 2010 years, and also avoidance of taxes of rich persons, including the citizens of Russia who are constantly living in Britain, to whom the British government provides preferential tax treatment. Publications of materials about the Panama Documents, which are made public in April 2016, allocated Great Britain as the country in the center of network of avoidance of taxes for the super-rich. After holding a referendum on an exit from the EU, many leaders world, as well as some Russian banks, made the decision on the translation of the headquarters from London to other EU countries. The road network makes 3497 kilometers of the main roads, km of highways and km of minor roads.
Krupnoy highway of the country carries name A.
In 2009 in Great Britain there were 34 million registered cars. The railway system has 16116 km on the British Island and 303 km in Northern Ireland, on which 18000 passengers and 1000 freight cars are daily transported. In a year from October 2009 to September 2010, the British airports in total served 211.4 million passengers. For this period, the London Heathrow 65.6 million passengers. Gatwick 31.5 million passengers. And Stansted 18.9 million passengers became the largest airports.
Heathrow, located in 24 kilometers to the west of the capital, serves the most large number of the international passengers in the world and is a hub for the main airline of the country, British Airways, and also for BM and Virgin Atlantic Airlines.
In 2006, Great Britain was the 9th world consumer of energy and the 15th producer.
In 2007, the general consumption of energy by the country was
9.5 quadrillion, 2 consisting of oil 38%, natural gas 36%, coal 13%, atom 11%, and other renewable sources 2%.
In 2009, the United Kingdom produced 1.5 million barrels of oil a day, and consumed 1.7 million barrels. Recently, production of oil began to be reduced, and since 2005, Great Britain is an importer of oil.
For 2010, Britain had about 3.1 billion barrels of the proved reserves of crude oil, the largest among the members of the EU. In 2009, Great Britain was also the 13th producer of natural gas in the world and the largest in EC. As well as with oil, recently volumes of production began to be reduced, and since 2004 the country began to import gas.
Great Britain, one of the largest importers of liquefied natural gas in Europe, and according to forecasts the volume of import to the next decade will grow in high gear. In the same 2009, United Kingdom extracted 19.7 million tons of coal, and I consumed 60.2 million tons. For 2005, the general reserves available to coal mining made 171 million tons. However, the extensive coastal zone allows to count on potential stocks from 7 to 16 billion tons thanks to technology of underground gasification of coal.
If to count from the current consumption of coal of the country, these stocks of Britain will be enough from 200 to 400 years.
In Great Britain, several large energy companies are based, including 2 of 6 largest private energy companies, BP and Royal Dutch Shell.
England and Scotland were the leading centres of scientific revolution since 17th century. And Great Britain headed industrial revolution in the 18th century, and since then give to the world of the famous scientists and engineers.
Among the main scientific 17th-18th centuries, it is possible to allocate Isaac Newton, whose laws of the movement are one of fundamentals of modern science. In the 19th century, it is worth remembering Charles Darwin, whose theory of evolution by natural selection is fundamentals of all modern biological science. And James Clerk Maxwell, who formulated the classical electromagnetic theory, and also Stephen Hawking from more modern, who developed the main theories in cosmology, quantum gravitation and studying of black holes.
Large opening of the 18th century include the hydrogen discovered by Henry Cavendish, the 20th century, the penicillin discovered by Alexander Fleming, and the structure of DNA opened by Francis Crick. Large engineering projects and the inventions of the British include the engine developed by Richard Trevithick and Andrew Vivian in the 18th century, the electric motors of Michael Faraday, the glow lamp of Joseph Swan invented in the 19th century, and the first used phone patented by Alexander Graham Bell, and also the first working TZ of John Luigi Bird, the jet engine of Frank Whittle. A basis of the modern computer of Alan Turing, and also the World Wide Web invented by Tim Berners-Lee, invented in the 20th century. You shouldn't forget also about the London Royal Society, one of the oldest scientific organizations in the world, founded in 1660. Modern Great Britain plays one of the leading roles in the aviation industry, including the Rolls-Royce Company, the leader of the market of aircraft engines.
My Systems, the largest British military supplier and the 6th for the Pentagon.
And also other companies suppliers for the Airbus projects. 2 British companies, GlaxoSmithKline and AstraZeneca, are included into 5 largest pharmaceutical companies of the world, and in general the British companies open and develop more medicine than in any other country except Shaw. Britain remains also one of leaders of automotive industry, in particular engines, and has about 2,600 component manufacturers.
Scientific researches are also one of the main activities of the British universities, many of which create science and technology parks for simplification of production and work with the companies.
In 2004-2008 in Great Britain, 7% of world scientific research, the 3rd place in the world after the USA and China, were created. The British scientific magazines include Nature, British Medical Journal, and The Lancet. The culture of the United Kingdom is rich and various. It was affected by many factors.
The nature of the state, the history of the country as one of leaders of the Western democracy and noticeable military political player, and also the fact that the country was created as a result of the union of 4 certain states, each of which kept own traditions, habits and symbols.
Thanks to the British Empire, influence of the British culture, in turn, is traced in language, culture and the legal system of the former colonies. Many of the countries, including Australia, Canada, India, Ireland, New Zealand, the Republic of South Africa and the USA. The term the British literature belongs both to Great Britain and to the Isle of Man, the Channel Islands, and also literature of England, Wales and Scotland before their association. The bulk of the British literature is written in English. In 2005 in Great Britain about books were published, and in 2006 the country was the leader in the number of the published names in the world.
The English playwright and the poet William Shakespeare is considered one of the greatest in the history in the area, but also his contemporaries Christopher Marlowe and Ben Jonson are also well known.
Later there were such playwrights as Alan Ayckbourn, Harold Pinter, Michael Frayn and Tom Stoppard combined in themselves elements of surrealism, realism and other cultural currents. Among noticeable English authors of the Middle Ages it is possible to mark out Geoffrey Chaucer, the 14th century, Thomas Malory, the 15th century, Thomas More, the 16th century, and John Milton, the 17th century. In the 18th century Daniel Defoe, Robinson Crusoe's author, and Samuel Richardson became pioneers of the modern novel. In the 19th century further development in the person of Jane Austen, the Gothic writer Mary Shelley, the children's writer Lewis Carroll, Sisters Bronte, Charles Dickens, the naturalist Thomas Hardy, the realist George Eliot and poets William Blake and William Wordsworth followed. The English writers of the 20th century include Fantast Herbert Wells, children's writers of Rudyard Kipling, Alan Milne, Winnie the Pooh's creator, and Enid Blyton. Contradictory David Lawrence, modernist Virginia Woolf, satirist Evelyn Waugh, prophetical novelist George Orwell, popular Somerset Maugham and Graham Greene, writer of detectives Agatha Christie, Ian Fleming, founder James Bond, poets Thomas Eliot, Philip Larkin and Ted Hughes, fantasy writers John Tolkien, Clive Lewis and Joanne Rowling. The contribution of Scotland includes the detective writer Arthur Conan Doyle, founder Sherlock Holmes, romantic literature of Walter Scott, the children's writer James Barrie, adventure stories by Robert Louis Stevenson and the famous poet Robert Burns. Among modern Scottish writers it is possible to mark out Ian Rankin and Ian Banks. Wygodadden is considered the most ancient poem of Great Britain. Written approximately at the end of the 6th century on Near Hen Ogold, the ancient North. It was written on Cumbriski or Drevnavaliaske and has the first mention of King Arthur. Approximately since 17th century communication between Wales and the ancient north was lost, and the centre of the Welsh culture moved to modern Wales where the legend of Arthur was developed by Galfred Manmutski. The most famous Welsh medieval poet is David Gwali, 1320-1370, which wrote about the nature, religion and about love. He is also called one of the greatest poets of Europe of the time. Until the end of the 19th century, the Welsh literature was mainly in Welsh, and the majority of prose had religious character. The native of Swansea, Dylan Thomas, became known around the world in the middle of the 20th century. The influential priest and the nationalist Ronald Thomas was nominated for the Nobel Prize on Literature in 1996. Authors from other countries, generally from the Commonwealth countries, Ireland and the USA, lived and worked in Great Britain. The most noticeable it is possible to call Jonathan Swift, Oscar Wilde, Bram Stoker, Bernard Shaw, Joseph Conrad, Thomas Eliot, Ezra Pound, and also the modern British writers born abroad Kazuo Ishiguro and Salman Rushdie. The Beatles group is one of the most commercially successful and groups recognized by critics in the history. More than 1 billion records are sold worldwide. Various musical styles are popular in Great Britain, beginning from local folk music of England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland and finishing with a heavy metal and trip-hop. Among classical composers of Great Britain and its predecessors there are such persons as William Byrd, Henry Purcell, Edward Elgar, Gustav Holst, Arthur Sullivan. The most known on the work with the librettist William Gilbert, Ralph Vaughan Williams and Benjamin Britten, the pioneer of the modern British opera. Peter Maxwell Davies is one of the most outstanding living composers and is the current Master of Royal Music. Great Britain also the homeland of the Symphonic Orchestra of BBC, recognized around the world. Among the famous British conductors there are such names as Simon Rattle, John Barbirolli and Malcolm Sargent. Noticeable film composers are John Barry, Clint Mansell, Mike Oldfield, John Powell, Craig Armstrong, David Arnold, John Murphy and Harry Gregson Williams. George Frederick Handel, though was born in Germany, was the naturalized British citizen, and some of his works, including The Messiah, are written in English. Andrew Lloyd Webber achieved considerable world success and is the author of music for musicals, and his works for many years dominated in the London West End and were often used on the Broadway in New York. Works of the Beatles group are sold by number more than 1 billion, they are the most sold in the history of music, had a huge impact on development of popular music. It is possible to distinguish from other famous representatives of the British popular music of the last 50 years Queen, Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden, The Who, Cliff Richard, Bee Gees, Elton John, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd and the Rolling Stones, each of which overcame a mark of 200 million sold copies. According to a research of the Guinness Book of Records, 8 of 10 groups and singers with the greatest number of victories in the British chart is from Great Britain. Status Quo, Queen, The Rolling Stones, UB, Depeche Mode, Bee Gees, Pet Shop Boys and Manic Street Preachers. The history of the British art is an integral part of history of the European art. Among the famous British artists it is possible to mention William Blake, John Constable, Samuel Palmer and William Turner's Romantist. Portraitists Joshua Reynolds and Lucian Freud. Landscape writer Thomas Gainsborough. Pioneer of the movement of arts and crafts William Morris. Francis Bacon's figurativist. Representatives of pop art of Peter Blake, Richard Hamilton and David Hockney. Duet Gilbert and George. Abstract artist Howard Hodgkin. Sculptors Anthony Gormley, Anish Kapoor and Henry Moore. The wide style and genre range is characteristic of the British art. In the second half of the 19th century, at the same time, there were such radical currents as the Victorian fantastic painting, John Anster Fitzgerald and John Simmons, and naturalism, George Clausen and William Stott. In the late 80s and the 1990th years, the Sochi Gallery in London helped to draw attention to a group of multi-genre artists who then became known as Young British Artists. Damien Hirst, Chris O'Feely, Rachel Waitard, Tracy Emin, Mark Wallinger, Sam Taylor Wood and Brothers Chapman. The Royal Academy of Arts in London is the main organisation for development of arts in Great Britain. Among the largest galleries, the London National Gallery, National Portrait Gallery, Tate Britain and Tate Modern, the most visited museum of modern art, about 4.7 million visitors a year. Great Britain had a great influence on cinema history. The British directors Alfred Hitchcock and David Lean are considered as one of the most popular directors in the history, and among other famous directors it is possible to mark out Charlie Chaplin, Michael Powell, Harold of Reed and Ridley Scott. Many British actors achieved world fame and recognition, including Julie Andrews, Richard Burton, Michael Caine, Sean Connery, Vivien Leigh, David Niven, Laurence Olivier, Peter Sellers, Kate Winslet, Anthony Hopkins, Hugh Grant. Some of the most successful in the world in the commercial plan of movies were also created in Great Britain, among which and the most profitable series of movies: Harry Potter and James Bond. In the world, the Ealing Studios lays claim to the oldest working film studio in the world. Despite extensive and successful history, the British industry is often characterized by disputes on existence of her identity and the American and European influence. Many British movies saw producer together with the American producers, in them the American actors on an equal basis with British often act, and the British actors often act in Hollywood. Many successful Hollywood movies are based on the British people, literature or events as, for example, Titanic, The Lord of the Rings and Pirates of the Caribbean Sea. In 2009 the British movies collected $2 billion worldwide, having received 7% a market share in the world and 17% in Great Britain. In total uncashed desks of Great Britain about £944 million in 2009 at 173 million visits of movie theatres were collected. The British Institute of Cinema made rating 100 of the best, according to them, the British movies. The annual award BAFTA is the British equivalent of an award the Oscar. Many popular sports, among which there is a soccer, rugby -15, rowing, boxing, badminton, cricket, tennis, darts and golf, appeared and were developed in Great Britain and the countries by it preceding. In the majority of competitions separate teams play for England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, including at the Commonwealth Games. However, there are also cases when the uniform team plays for Great Britain, including the Olympic Games where it is presented to the uniform national team. London was the venue of the Olympic Games in 1908 and 1948, and in 2012 became the first city hosting the Olympic Games 3 times.
Each part of the country has the football association, national team and the system of the championship, though some clubs for various historical and logistic reasons play not in those associations to which have to belong on territorial sign.
For example, Swansea City.
English national teams Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland compete on the international scene as separate teams because of what Great Britain didn't participate in football competitions of the Olympic Games up to the Olympic Games of 2012 in London.
Due to the victory of the application for holding games in 2012, offers on revival of the uniform national team for participation in them. However, football associations of Scotland appeared. Wales and Ireland refused to participate in this project, being afraid that it will shake their independent status. English national team is the most successful national team, having won a Howsack in 1966, though historically there was a close rivalry of England and Scotland. The cricket was thought up in England and is very popular in the territory of the whole country and the former colonies. Wales has no national team and acts together with England, also as well as representatives of Scotland and Ireland, the national teams on whose cricket began to develop only recently. It is popular in some regions of Great Britain. He appeared to Huddersfield and generally play him in Northern England. The uniform national team, the British Lions, acted in a World Cup and Test matches earlier. However, since 2008 England, Scotland and Ireland compete as the certain countries. In rugby, -15 English national teams, Scotland, Wales and Ireland in itself are very strong. The Cup of Six Nations played between the above-named national teams and also Italy and France is considered the informal European Championship. Playing tennis appeared in the city of Birmingham somewhere between 1859 and 1865.
The Wimbledon tournament is the international tournament held in Wimbledon in the south of London every summer, and it is considered one of the most prestigious tournaments in the world.
The snooker enjoys wide popularity in Great Britain, and the annual World Cup is held in Sheffield. Such team sports as the Gaelic soccer and hurling, in which for matches many viewers gather, are also popular in Northern Ireland. The game shinty is popular in the Scottish Highlands. Great Britain is also presented in motorsport. Many teams and pilots of Formula One are based exactly here, and the British pilots won more titles than representatives of any other country.
In Great Britain passed also the very first Test Grand Prix of the World Cups in 1950 on the route Silverstone, where now almost annually there passes the Grand Prix of Great Britain.
In the country also there pass stages of the World Rally Championship. For all the time of the Olympic Games, the national team of Great Britain won most of all medals in sailing. London dominates in the sector of media in Great Britain. Nationwide newspapers, TV channels and radio generally are based exactly there, though Manchester is also the important media centre.
Edinburgh, Glasgow and Cardiff are the important centres for newspapers and broadcasting channels of Scotland and Wales. In 2009 it was estimated that each resident of Great Britain spent 3.75 hours a day at the TV and 2.81 hours I listen to radio.
Same year public TV channels BBC occupied 28.4% of viewings of television. 3 independent channels had the general share of 29.5%, and the remaining 42.1% occupied satellite and digital channels. From the 1970th, sales of newspapers were strongly reduced, and by 2009 42% of the population read daily newspapers. TV and radio broadcasting in Great Britain is divided into public and commercial. Public TV and radio broadcasting is presented by the Speaker of BBC Broadcasting on First, BBC One, and the Second Channel, BBC Two, and 4 radio stations: BBC Radio 1, BBC Radio 2, BBC Radio 3, BBC Radio. Commercial TV and radio broadcasting is presented by speakers of it, broadcasting on the 3rd channel, Channel 4 broadcasting on the 4th channel, as well as BBC, being national property, but completely financed by advertising, and Channel 5 broadcasting on the 5th channel on the basis of constant licenses. Also far. Write comments. Read comments. Interesting people will tell interesting stories. All of good mood and good luck.